Really, anything you do is yoga. How you sit, how you stand, how you walk, how you talk, how you move, how you think. That's everything is yoga, right? Yoga, union with your true self, the nature of your true self, observing yourself as you really are. Modern versions of yoga try to change your condition. So I want to feel better or want to go from A to B. But really, the essence of more ancient practices is observing as you are. And nothing is temporary, so it automatically will change. So just in the observance of it, it's going to change. You just don't have as strong of a reaction to it. And I think that the more we emphasize introspection, things that align with justice and service, as you highlighted earlier on, that is more aligned, I think, with what yoga is.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to MYYT, where you are learning to level up your yoga teaching one masterful class at a time. I am back, baby, and it feels so good. I'm home in Las Vegas after 2 weeks away. I was in just outside of Toronto, Canada, to perform in a show called Yesterday Once More. It's a tribute to the Mamas and Papas, the Fifth Dimension, ABBA, and the Carpenters. And I had so much fun. I was so grateful for this opportunity and this chance to sing, to travel, and to work with my husband, and to be able to bring baby Finn, our almost 8-month-old, with us. And our families were able to come to nanny and babysit while we were performing. They were watching baby Finn. So it was kind of like a culmination of all of my favorite things. I just was multiple times, I was pinching myself being like, is this really my life? Like I get to do all the things that I love. So it was a real treat for me, and I loved every second of it. And I'm not going to lie, when we touched down, when we were exiting the plane, and you get just like confronted with this offensive wall of heat, I was like, turn this plane around, take me back. Cause it was like a pleasant 80 degrees in Canada the whole time. And Woodstock, where we were, is just gorgeous and green and beautiful, and rained multiple times. So I was just trying to soak up that smell. I was like, I wish I could bottle this smell of just fresh earth and dirt. People were like, what are you doing? And I'd be over in the corner just like smelling how beautiful it smelled, because you don't get that here in Vegas, of just like leaves and nature like that. We get like succulents and cactus and rocks. Which is beautiful, but just in a different way. So anyway, I'm back. I'm so glad to be here. Hopefully you can tell, even in the sound quality, I've got my whole situation, the ring lights, the Yeti Blue mic, the Logitech cam. So all of it looks better. Tried to travel really light and just do the interviews on either my MacBook or my phone. So it feels nice to have all of the things and just be back in the normal swing of things. I wanted to take a second and celebrate, especially mainly you, the listeners, because my podcast producer, shout out to Carrie. Carrie makes me sound really good over here, and she edits all the podcasts with the guests and with me. Anyway, she reached out to me a couple days ago and said that we somehow missed kind of 2 milestones: the 500 download mark and then the 1,000 download mark. I asked her, I was like, hey, how are we doing? And she was like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden, last time we checked, we had like maybe 300 downloads. And then we looked again and it was already up to almost 1,200. So I just want to say, I want to scream and shout and dance and cheer and just be like, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you to you out there, all the listeners who are coming back each and every week to take their yoga teaching to the next level, to gain business tips and inspiration. It means so much to me that you're here. And if you haven't, please take a second to pause the recording right now and rate the show. If you're on Spotify, you look for the little ellipses, the 3 dots. Smash that button. It's going to say rate show, and then drop 5 stars. I'm not actually sure how to do it on Apple. Do people actually listen on Apple? So I'm such a Spotify girl and have been for so many years, but I'm sure it's just as straightforward and simple on Apple. But do that because it helps other people see that this is a legit, helpful resource, and will pull in other yoga teachers like you who are interested in continuing their education and developing their skill. So I would be so grateful if you not only continue to listen to the podcast, but rate it, send it to some of your yoga teacher friends, throw it up on your stories. Like, let's spread the word about this, because I have so many incredible guests in the pipeline for you. And I know that it's just going to keep bringing so much value to you. So help me spread the word, and I'd be really grateful. I need true story submissions from you. True stories are submissions from listeners that could be anything, really. Any experience that you've ever had in your yoga teaching career, a funny story, an embarrassing story, a heartfelt story, whatever it may be. It takes 2 seconds to fill out this form, and it's a chance for you to be featured on the show. So after you rate the show, go ahead and check out the link in the show notes that says submit your true story for your story to be told here on the show. I would really, really love that. In this episode, I continue to chat with Mayuri Bhandari about the big topic of appropriation. Personally, I have learned so much from these 3 parts, and I'm really inspired by Mayuri's passion about this topic. And I really appreciate how she challenges us to think about not just being a yoga teacher, but live yoga as a way of life. And that if we really adopted yoga as principles for living, that you would see a lot more activism, and that you would use yoga to bring about more justice and peace in the world. Specifically, we dive into topics and things like pulling back the curtain on yoga festivals. We chat about the problem with fame and popularity of yoga teachers. Mayuri asks, where is all of this money going? The yoga industry is now worth $115 billion as of 2023. And she asked us to think about what we are funding. She chats about brown tokenism and the weirdness of being the only brown person in the room, with white teachers either being straight up incorrect or just others looking to her for fact checks. She shares the most profound experience of yoga that she's ever witnessed in the most unexpected place. And we talk about where modern yoga goes wrong, and most importantly, what to do now knowing all of this. This conversation is part 3 of 3. So if you haven't yet listened to part 1 or part 2, go ahead and pause this episode to catch up so that it's a little more cohesive. I know you're going to get so much out of this. I'm so excited for you to listen. So let's dive in. Hey yogis, Mackenzie Fly here, mom, yogapreneur, teacher trainer, retreat leader, and your guide to master your yoga teaching. This podcast is your weekly dose of actionable wisdom and candid chats with industry experts. Learn to connect deeper, weave yogic magic, and lead by example. Full disclosure, I'm still mastering it too, but together we'll skyrocket your impact and income. Hit subscribe and let's grow, one episode at a time. Mayuri Bhandari is a professor of yoga at Loyola Marymount University. Her focus as an instructor and practitioner lies in the application of yoga beyond the mat as a way of life. An actress, dancer, figure skater, and storyteller within both American and Indian film industries, Mayuri voices an ahimsic, nonviolent way of life, women's empowerment, and stories of Indian experience and identity. Additionally, she was a volunteer of prison yoga and meditation at the Twin Towers facility in DTLA. Mayuri holds a BA in Dance and South Asian Studies from UC Berkeley and an MA in Yoga Studies from LMU. She has taught with Arihanta Academy, Lifetime Fitness, and Studio Spaces in Los Angeles. Mayuri, thank you for coming back for this 3-part series.
I'm happy to be here with you, Mackenzie.
Still happy to be here.
Yes.
Yes. This has been an epic conversation, and she has really given her all to this. And we are so grateful to have you. And I'm excited to kind of wrap up this conversation. Just to kind of remind everybody who's listening, as this is the 3rd and final part of a series, really encourage and recommend that you pause this episode if you haven't listened to the previous two. So there's part 1 and part 2 before this. This is part 3, as the conversation builds and stacks on each other, as we try to uncover what appropriation is versus appreciation and start to know better and do better together. So where we ended last time with our last episode was a little bit on well, so many things, but the whole kind of main heartbeat or sutra, if you will, of the episode was on the commodification of yoga. And I think you had a little bit more within that topic that you wanted to share.
So, I mean, I'll say this thing as well is a lot of people will ask me about pronunciation, even, like mispronunciation, or like, if I mispronounce it, is it okay? Or things like that. And I wanted to bring that in because some people I feel really put the care in to try to learn how to pronounce it. They'll be like, well, still people say I'm doing, it wrong. Or, I boil it down as always, intention, awareness, and action. So if you feel like you don't want to use the Sanskrit, it's okay. If you don't feel comfortable, again, I'm not the police on this, but I'm saying from my perspective that I think it's okay. But I would encourage people to know the Sanskrit, even if you don't want to say it. I think that's very important. But I would say that in the attempts, because if you have different languages, like if you speak Spanish, it's very easy to pronounce the phonetics, the sound, because it's almost the same. Using the different parts of your mouth. It'll give you an exercise. Give it a shot, asana for the mouth, if you will, in a different way. I think what is important is that people need to understand that if you do go about pronouncing it, sometimes I feel like teachers will have this attitude of like, I'm just going to say it the way I want to say it, and it doesn't really matter, and it's like saying the pronunciation, the syllables in a way does make a difference. And, if you're trying your best and you've listened to how it's supposed to be pronounced online or from someone else, I get that. But if you're someone who's just like, I don't really, really care, put some intention into it, because trust me, as a listener, I can hear when someone's trying and when someone doesn't care at all. And I'm not bagging on the person personally who's trying to say it right. And I can hear the effort versus someone who's just being like, this is just, it's how I'm going to say it. And so that to me represents a thing of a bigger whole of what do we say about how we're looking. And that's just a small example of the different parts of the practice where the same attitude is perpetuated in a way. As far as it goes with, more of the commodification, I see this even more, this behavior, this attitude, even more in like what I've read about festival spaces. I don't go to festivals. I don't go to any yoga festivals or lightning in a bottles or Burning Man. I feel the most removed. I feel the most out of place because everything there to me literally feels just like the opposite of what it's about. I'm not saying every vendor or every person is like that or every person going there is like that. It's just overall how the vibe makes me feel, because usually these spaces are, so expensive to even purchase a ticket. They're done in the middle of nowhere where they're saying you're connecting to the land, but they're trashing the land. Like they're not doing the things that it's supposed to be about. They're talking about being one with nature. And like, it just seems like a poverty fetish for an $800 ticket. You know what I mean? Like with these festivals and this thing that they're going for. There's a fantastic book called White Utopias by this woman who literally studied and gathered data of different festivals over 20-ish years, 15 to 20 years. And she just gathers data of everything that she finds. And she's doing it from more of a yogic spirituality, wellness perspective. And her findings showed not only the money of what these were earning and the trajectory of how these exponentially grow over the past 25, 30 years in America specifically. She finds that the one thread that was common through Burning Man, lightning in a bottle, everything. She went to Australia, like different festivals, was yoga and the popularity of yoga and the money with yoga. And everything else was like more or less. But she gathers some pretty incredible quotes and interviews in this book. And why I want to bring this up is to show that the founders of some of these festivals say some of these things. And so it kind of ties in some of the things that we were talking about before. We were talking about representation and brown tokenism, which we haven't touched upon fully quite yet. Because sometimes people will look at me and be like, oh, well, you're the authentic voice. That's why you should teach. And I'm like, but I don't want to teach. I don't even feel qualified to teach. I feel like a hypocrite because I can barely live my life. Who am I to tell people what to do? You know what I mean? Even though I was raised in the spirituality, which is Jain yoga, and, I understand it, but that doesn't mean that's not what I want to. I don't even feel like I should, but I feel like the bar is so low that I felt an obligation. And the teachers also, Eric and John really encouraged. They were like, "You got to teach," and I'm like, "But I don't want to." Like, "You got to teach," and I'm like, "Okay." So I guess so. And I do teach dance and fitness and all these other styles. So teaching wasn't hard for me. Like, I am a teacher by what I do, but yoga is personal a different way. For me, it's a personal practice. It's a learning. It was never about it. And even now I say I'm a guide in asana. I'm a guide in some basics because it doesn't interest me to teach basics to people who just aren't aware of the basics. Like that's not part of my learning. You see what I'm saying? So it gets a bit fatiguing for me in that way. But taking it back to the festivals, I saw in this book, there was this quote, and I'll say this one with you. I won't give all the quotes, but it was talking about diversity and representation and inclusion of Indian voices in these festivals. And she had asked the festival founder this question. And the founder, I'm paraphrasing, but the essence of what I'm saying is accurate. I'm like, this is what this person said. I just might be not using as many of the words as this person used, or changing some of the words a little bit. But he said literally that we include brown people at these events. We every time we do this festival, we have we fill up their motels every year. Like that. When we do the festival, our tickets sell, and they're the motels that fill up. Like, we include them in our events. They've like, he mentions all the hotels' names and he snaps it up and he says they fill up this fast. And he said, we invite them to come to the festival. When they came, they were like, saw us doing kirtan and yoga, and they were like, and he even imitates, "What do you know about kirtan and yoga?" Like, that's what they even like. And like, he says, like, and then to which he responds to his own question of the way he asked that, like, he's like, "Yeah, I've been going to India since 1980. I mean, these people don't even want to be Indian. They change their names, they do this and that. I go to India every 2 to 3 months. I'm more Indian than them. Like, they don't know anything about their own yoga." And so this is just to show a founder of a festival in recent years. This is not something back in the day. This is just a sample of the people that are leading these type of things and how they respond to questions like this. And the question of authenticity being threatened, right? So you want the brownness, but you want the benefits, but not the brownness, right? Because when it's questioned on what are you guys really doing with what is this kirtan and yoga that you guys are doing, doesn't feel quite right. It's like, oh, if brown people actually show up, it's like, oh, now what we're doing it's not the real thing, And so it's a very interesting question. We see this demonization of yoga in the school system as well. So in 2013, 2017, 2018, there were different schools that were sued by private families because they were teaching their kids yoga and they thought it was Hindu devil worship. And so they didn't pass, but it was allowed to be passed as long as the kids were being taught yoga with no mention of India, Indian history, Sanskrit, or any culture education. And it was dumbed down to animal monkey movements. So what does it say about the culture being like, don't you want to learn about other cultures? And first of all, as I said, yoga is secular, right? Yoga is not a religion, though it is inspired from, Indian spiritualities. But like, we've just got this very weird thing where I say yoga is screwed on both ends. On one hand, it's whitewashed under the name of appreciation. And on the other, it's demonized as Hindu black magic and seen as a threat. So you want the benefits of the practice, but we don't want anything to do with that Indian stuff, right? And I said you can't separate the two, So I think that book is a really great thing to check out in terms of just exposure to the wellness industry. And when people talk about self-love and self-care, I'm like, doing your nails and getting a massage is not self-love. That's treating yourself. And there is nothing wrong with treating yourself. But if you want to treat yourself, just call it what it is. And in these festivals, like, yo, if you want to like take drugs and like take all these substances and like do all these like rave things. Go to a rave, call it a party, that's it. Don't call it a yoga festival, because that's not what a yoga festival is. So it's just the way that we're going about this and what we're associating as freeing our minds and freeing our bodies. It's just like a poverty fetish out in the desert for a few seconds to make it feel like you got that experience without actually, again, returning it to doing that work, right? So I just wanted to highlight some of the examples of, how these festivals represent the bigger issue, in a very quick way, because though they only happen a couple times a year, they really do address what that issue is, or they bring up these points for me in this book. And also, I find very interesting that a lot of white teachers who learned yoga, it's so interesting to me to watch their journey of how they took a teacher training in India, they put their videos on YouTube, and they become so popular over time. And that's fine, but they're not doing anything special or particular or specifically deep. It's like they just learned something. They're not even sure about what they learned, but then they become famous teachers over time just because, again, they fit that mold of what this look of what a teacher should look like. And they become popular off of not even knowing, just guessing, because they fit the aesthetic or the vibe or whatever, or it's approachable or whatever. And so I think that it's very interesting to see it through the lens of when I'm in India and I'm like, oh my God, like I was in India 10 years ago and I saw all of these ashrams and spaces advertising, we provide 200-hour yoga alliance. And I was like, what? Like the fact that Indians had to feel that they had to, and I asked why. And they said that we don't get students if we don't advertise that, like Yoga Alliance, American nonprofit organization. Like they're the ones that are dictating. And I'm like, where does all this, my question to all these festivals and spaces is, where does all this money go? Y'all are making bank. Where is this money going aside from your pocket? How are you actually contributing to serving communities and oppressive issues and marginalized issues? The whole thing. So the money is there. The money is being made. Where is it going? And see, this is where I'm just like, I'm baffled. And I also want to speak on, since we're talking about issues on the West, issues on the East. It's not like yoga is pure in its Eastern form. Like some parts of different lineages of yoga, Hindu yoga, have issues of caste supremacy, have a history of caste supremacy, not including low caste groups or tribal groups, or sometimes like ashrams will be built on indigenous land, using it as a Hindu pursuit, like further pushing a Hindutva national movement sometimes to bring back yoga from the West, like reclaim yoga from the West in an effort. So you do see a very interesting history as well in India, not with everyone, but like Jainism and Buddhism were popular. They were counterculture because they broke caste and class. They took power away from, Hindu, more Brahmanical lineages. And it wasn't until it became part of pop culture, like Hinduism kind of brought yoga in as well. And it became part of pop culture that now it's kind of this mix and different people were doing different things. So you do have a very complex conversation when it comes to caste supremacy and white supremacy in the conversation of yoga. So I ask people, when is yoga going to be free? Because yoga seems to be in a bind here, let alone us as well. So that's how I kind of see it.
That's such a fresh perspective that again flips it to both sides and isn't pointing the finger to blame at one specific group, but always like back at ourselves too, because everybody can always, back to even our first episode of, it's more so the practice of self-inquiry and always asking yourself, is there another layer that I could take this inner work deeper and apply it to other areas? So, wow, I had never really thought of it that way, in the sense of that it's broken in some ways in the East as well.
Oh yeah, and I think I didn't know until I learned about it. I mean, a lot of brown people don't even know our own history. It's been taken away from us also. Like our history has been so sanitized, colonialized, depending on all the different countries that have been colonized, same narrative of we don't know our own history very well, in terms of what our own sensuality and spirituality have gone through and what it's taken to be where it's at. And so, I learned this when I was in the academic program, studying. And so taking it there, I think, naturally shift the conversation to the brown tokenism, where I felt like I was in a yoga program, whether it was, yoga studies or, yoga in the yoga teacher training. I'm always the only Indian person in the room in a practice that comes from my background. And that's a really weird place to be in, where you're just like, and I understand. I'm not saying it's like, look, Indians aren't encouraging, a lot of immigrant families aren't like, go into the artsy spirituality thing. Like, it's about survival and making money and having a stable life. Like, the doctor, lawyer, engineer, like, business, technology, like, this is good. Don't have a degree in dance and yoga and like, no, like, that's not where we're at. So it's not like families are encouraging their children per se to go into these fields. Um, you know, but it interested me because it was a philosophical program and not an asana based program. Because you had to have like an asana understanding before even coming into the program. Not that you had to fully, but you had to be interested in the philosophy. And that's what intrigued me into the program. And though I think the program has a good intentions and it's pretty new and all of that, the faculty, when I was in the program, only one teacher, she was only for Sanskrit, was South Asian, was Indian. And after that, currently there are no Indian teachers at all in the program. I'm not saying they all have to be Indian teachers. I'm not saying authentic class is an Indian voice. That's not what I'm saying at all. But in a philosophical program where we're doing language and we're doing culture and we're doing history and we're doing philosophy, I was shocked that there were no like Indian teachers, because in the classroom I could tell the difference between what was being taught, how it was being taught, and I was the only one who could see these micro and macroaggressions that I felt my whole life. And it's not like I started as a young kid being like, I'm calling out all these micro macroaggressions. I didn't know a dang thing when I was little. I was actually super like, everybody has their own opinion. I was quite sheltered from the history that exists, the history of the United States, of my own culture, in depth. And I didn't even realize initially that what were microaggressions, because I was the only person in the room. And I didn't even know that was, if I were to have a conversation with another person, another Indian person who maybe has experience, be like, that was weird, wasn't it? Or like, is that in my head? Like, and so only years later was like, oh, when I heard people of color talk, because they talk about the same thing of this weird dynamic of being in these spaces where it's about our thing, but yet we're not voices in it, but they're teaching it wrong. So I'm in a program paying money, but yet I'm the one who ends up re-educating. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, so and I'm like, why am I here? You know what I'm saying? And so it was a very weird thing, because not like I knew everything, not at all, but from a cultural standpoint, and not just like asking questions randomly and mistranslating. And it was kind of interesting for me, because that's what made me first realize that, like, oh, this is a much bigger problem. Like, it was like, this is representing a bigger issue, and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting. And and to be, and obviously, like, people will turn to me to be like, oh, is this right? Is this okay? Or like not in the class per se, but like, it was just like, oh, since you're the person in that program, you're going to know it. Is it authentic? Is it not authentic? Like, is it legit? Is it not legit? Like, like, it's it's a difficult thing to say. And it also allowed me, it was a beautiful program for me, even though I didn't like the program very much per se for my own yoga spiritual growth. In a sense, I loved it for my artistic growth, because it allowed me to take each of the concepts, and every semester I made an artistic project of it, which is how the Bindi film came to life, which is because I learned the origins of the Bindi coming from a yoga root, and I created the poem. So it actually spearheaded my arts, my artistic projects and endeavors, which I thought was beautiful. And I really appreciated that. Because again, spirituality and sensuality, arts, and it's all part of the same thing. But yeah, I do feel like in life, let alone in the classroom, it's just a lot of these feelings of like, I don't, just as much as people don't want to hear about it, I don't want to talk about it. Even today, like, I appreciate you. And I even told you this, that I'm on the podcast with you because I know who you are. I know your intentions. I know what you're going for. But I may sound very passionate about this because I am passionate about the culture. But trust me, I don't, I'd rather talk about other things. You know what I mean? Like these things feel so heavy and feel so responsible that it's just like, oof, it's like nothing really changes. So it feels a bit disheartening or hopeless because it's like, yes, I speak, yes, I talk, but what, like, what's really going to change? And I feel like a lot of people of color feel that fatigue.
I cannot imagine the complexity of that emotion and feeling like you are when you said the bit about just like paying to receive the education but then retraining, but then it also puts this pressure on you to also know everything within that tradition, and then when people look at you to say is this authentic and legit, you're like I don't know. I'm here to also learn as well. So that's such a conundrum, and I hear what you're saying in that regard, but to make us all feel to put it to where we can all relate to one another, how now, having listened to all three of these episodes, can we as a group of people who are interested in yoga, whether we're a yoga practitioner or a yoga teacher, how can we represent better, or how what do we need to know from here on out to be a real teacher with competency instead of just this like completion hour certificate from a YTT, that we can move forward to fix some of these problems.
Yeah, again, I know I keep saying this, but I'm definitely not giving all the solutions and I don't even know if I'm the right person to I could of course provide my voice and my opinion, but don't take like, okay, we got to do these things. But I think I've I've said that, you know, if you really just practice your own practice, like live this way of life. And I know that sounds super general and I've said that before, but really taking a look at the yamas and the niyamas, reading as many books as you can that you can find, again, going to actually, you can only understand it by experiencing it. So the more that you put yourself in places of meditation, of breath work, of in nature, engaging with, you know, the different any and every practice that you can get your hands on or that interests you, I think the experience will tell you the knowledge lies inside of you. That's what yoga really talks about, is that the knowledge resides within us. We just have to remember it. We have to hear it. We have to match that frequency. It's something we already know. We just have to re-remember. We have to re-find that thing again. So the answer really lies in you and some way of figuring out. It's not so much, do I do this practice or do I not do this practice? Honestly, the method or the name doesn't matter. What matters is the work. And so, whatever that work means to you, for introspection, for journaling, for observing your habits, for seeing how you do what you do, seeing the systems for what they are, watching documentaries, educating yourself. It can get so general, but really I keep bringing it back to that. Trying to seek spaces and teachers that resonate with you, and that may not be called yoga. So this is something I really want to emphasize, that I feel like a lot of real yogic work isn't even called yoga here, and probably in India too, because I feel like now anything that becomes popular in the West becomes popular back in India. So now the Western version of yoga and attire is becoming popular in the city parts of India, and I'm like, what is happening? Like I stop it. You know what I mean? Like what is going on? Um, and that also has to do with this like whole colonial thing of like, bowing down to what the Western world is doing and all of that. That's an India problem. And that's like a lot, not just an India problem, but I think unfortunately a lot of places have this situation. But I will say that where I've talked a lot about where I don't find yoga, or where I don't see like more of what real yoga practice is. But I found the most yoga in a place that wasn't calling it yoga at all. And that was at the Standing Rock Dakota Access Pipeline back in 2016, where it was the first time that like all Native nations had gathered to fight the pipeline that was being trying to be made through their reservation and disturbing their water and the river and their land and their way of life, and affecting all the people who were connected to that river after, because of the toxins that could fall in because of that pipeline that was trying to be made. And it was the biggest gathering in many years, actually probably the biggest gathering. And it was all people from all over the world had gathered. And this is when I was in the yoga program. I was like, I have to see what's going on over there. So I actually went for a few days, and everything on their orientation, like, because people were living on the camp. They were living on the land. Like 3,000 people had gathered just to live on a Chetishokewan camp. They had 3 camps. And people from all over were in this movement, this nonviolent protest movement. And all of their, literally like all of their rules for the camp mirrored a yoga ashram. Like you could take the sutras, and it was exactly the same. And their method was a nonviolent protest, has been. And, they talked about how they were the protectors, not the protesters. And everyone had to go through training on how to protest in a nonviolent way, how to breathe, how to lock elbow in elbow, how to not be separated by the police. It was the most organized thing I had ever seen. And though I knew nonviolence my entire life, like as a Jain person, like I lived principles and understood ahimsa quite, well intellectually, and to a certain extent in physical sense as well. In that moment when I was being pepper sprayed and sprayed with water and all that with the rest of the protectors, I wanted to run. I mean, I wanted to, like, what, we're nonviolent until we're attacked, or until, we are confronted with violence. And then the nonviolence, I mean, just can go away. And I just noticed, like, it was all grounded in breath and prayer and humility. And it was, again, I understood in that moment that nonviolence has to be experienced. It has to be trained. It's not just something that's automatically there just because I think it's there or because I believe the concept. And so that's what I mean by experiencing these things, not just knowing them. And so that was the most yogic thing I had ever seen. When I'm in prison yoga, when I was volunteering with prison yoga, and I saw the effects of what some of the inmates never knew how to breathe. They didn't know they could be in control of their breath or their diaphragm. Like they, entire life were in fight or flight mode because of their surroundings, because of what they were, the conditions they were in, the way they were raised, because of, unfortunately, the low income and a lot of the places that are the situations for marginalized communities. And some of the people, when they were taking class, like they would talk about how they didn't even know that they didn't have to react like fight or flight mode. They didn't know that they could be in control of their response if they could just know how to breathe. And simple things like that, we may feel like, oh, but we're free. We're not in a prison. But in a way, we are in our own things. We are in our own prison where we are not truly free. We may be independent, but we're not free. And I think those get confused a lot on what liberation really is. And so I find that, like, it's such a beautiful thing to see where yoga really lies, and it doesn't have to be called yoga. So whether that's serving the community in one of the things that aligns you, but really giving space to self, silence, stillness within, not having to feel like to be outward as much, engage in the world as well, observe the world as well, but also understand the inner world, and that you can trust yourself more than if you do your work. So I think that there's so many things that could be, really anything you do is yoga. How you sit, how you stand, how you walk, how you talk, how you move, how you think. That's everything is yoga, right? Yoga, union with your true self, the nature of your true self, observing yourself as you really are. Modern versions of yoga try to change your condition. So I want to feel better or want to go from A to B. But really the essence of more ancient practices is observing as you are. And nothing is temporary, so it automatically will change. So just in the observance of it, it's going to change. You just don't have as strong of a reaction to it. And I think that the more we emphasize introspection, things that align with justice and service, as you highlighted earlier on, that is more aligned, I think, with what yoga is.
That was so beautiful. That was so beautiful. I can't wait to re-listen to that. And really, all three of these episodes have meant so much to me, and I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to help us understand more. And I agree that the more you can remember, as you say, and consider this thing, this practice of yoga is this great remembering that yoga is an experience instead of really an action. Yoga is not really something that you do. We might do these kriyas or these vinyasas or whatever it may be. It's not an action. The experience of yoga is the experience, and it's a byproduct from those other specific ways of participating with something. So I think you just brought it back down to earth and explained it in a way that it becomes a whole lot more universal, a whole lot more not back to your non-harming. And I'm really, really inspired by it. So I hope that all the listeners are too. I know they are. If you are finished with all three of these episodes, listeners, please, please send them all to some of your yoga teacher friends, your yoga students. Help us spread this word and message because it's so important. And Mayuri, will you tell us one more time a little bit about your show, The Anti-Yogi, just in case some of the listeners are in the LA area around this time, and other ways that they can connect with you and all of your incredible magic?
Yeah, I am having the premiere of my first one woman show at the Hollywood Fringe Festival this June. Super nervous. And it's called The Anti-Yogi. It's one of hopefully several shows. And this one has to do with the spirit, the spirituality side of things for me. And yeah, it's basically a lot of the things that we talk about in a much more entertaining way. So it's an entertaining one woman show. It's a drama, existential dramedy. It's asking the question of what's my purpose beyond educating people about yoga, and what is a lot of things that we've talked about, but through the eyes of Goddess Kali coming on earth, and a lot of fantastical characters coming to life, and real experiences that I've had, and kind of acting out all of these things. Because I think I want to address this one thing as well, is that, unfortunately, I think what happens with a lot of us is because society is a certain way, at times, with representation and diversity, that I think we feel that we have to educate, or we have to educate for free, because, most people actually don't want to even provide, like, pay for time. It is our time. But what I feel is so important here is that who am I beyond talking about my brown experience and brown atrocities or brown experiences and identity? Because I'm much more than that. And you spoke on the universal topic. So in this show, I do address this point of, like, I don't want to be talking about this. I'm not this person. Yes, things are really bad. That's why I speak about it, or not. They're not talked about enough, or we need voices. So I speak about them, but that's not who I am. Like, who am I beyond my identity? Who am I beyond my race? Who am I beyond my anxiety, my job? That is the real me. That's yoga. That's the consciousness that we all are. And so I don't even get a chance to talk about that or explore that, because this is kind of all that's there. So this is something that is in the show as well. So that's also bringing it to everyone, and also bringing it through my eyes.
Oh, well, I can't wait to see it. And if you feel like, if you're like, I still have so much more to share beyond this, I want to give you the space and the platform to talk about that, because you are so much more than just this conversation. And I'm not saying sorry for reaching out to you and doing the same thing that everybody is doing, of like, help me understand. But in a way, I am. So I hear you and I see you, and I hope that I can give you that space to speak more that's not on these topics, and that you feel that this expression of your one woman show gets to share that with the world. And I know it's going to be amazing, because you're the one that's doing it. So we'll put all of the information in the show notes for everybody to check out, including her TikTok, her YouTube, the Hollywood Fringe links, as well as all of her links to get plugged in with her community. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mayuri. It has been a privilege and a pleasure to listen and learn from you.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. It was a pleasure to be with you. I'm very grateful as well that you reached out and that in the way that you did this as well. So it's because of you too. It's a mutual thing. So it's because of you that I feel comfortable doing this and talking about this. And I also want to say for anyone listening that you from the get-go were like, I want you to speak as openly as you'd like and not have any filters and not feel like you have to do it a certain way. And so you provided that space and you gave that to, you let that be known from the get-go. And so again, that is one of the reasons I choose my people very specifically of where I say yes to talk to. And so just so you know, it goes both ways. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And to all of our listeners, we appreciate you for taking the time to learn. And we hope that although this might have been controversial or sensitive or challenging or uncomfortable, that you, dear listener, dear yoga teacher, fellow aspirant, feel like now you've explored some of these heavier topics with a sense of reverence and respect and understanding, and all with the heart to continue to learn, which seems like that's your biggest piece of advice, Mayuri, through all of this. It's like, just keep searching inwardly, keep trying to see if we can do it better, or keep trying to be open to learning from other people, and keep even being wrong. But then if you're wrong, figure it out and keep going. So I have felt that from our conversation, and I hope that others have too. So thank you to everybody, to Mayuri, to the listeners. And until next week, stay blessed. Thanks for listening. If this is your first time, peruse our feed to see if there's something else that will serve you. We're so grateful that you're here and invite you to join our inner circle by subscribing to our newsletter. If this episode resonated with you, help us spread the word by sending it to a friend who needs to hear this message. Likes, follows, sends, shares, and reviews help us to continue delivering high-quality content to you for free each and every week. Don't forget to tag @MasterYourYogaTeaching so we can reshare. I am a certified yogi. However, this podcast is intended for information and entertainment only. If you are interested in mentorship or coaching with me, check out the website linked in the show notes to get more information. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on the podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of Mackenzie or CLW Studios. Learn more about Mackenzie, her guests, and CLW Studios by following the links in the show notes. Keep shining, and we will see you next Wednesday for another dose of Master Your Yoga Teaching. Namaste blessed.